In academia, you come across very few fundamentally new ideas. In health economics, there are probably only half a dozen or so seminal contributions that have really shaped the discipline. One of these is almost certainly the work of George Torrance, who proposed as part of his PhD thesis what has now become known as the Quality Adjusted Life Year, or QALY. Professor Torrance proposed the QALY to solve a problem in that health is inherently multidimensional. But his idea was that you could map health onto a single 0-1 index, which called utility, and that you could use that to quality adjust life years. Alongside George Torrance, there were also two other researchers working independently, Bush and Fanchel, who also came up with very similar ideas at around the same time. On the 50th anniversary of the QALY, I had the opportunity to talk to Professor Torrance, both about the origins of why he came up with the QALY, but also why it was adopted, and a discussion about whether it's still relevant today. This interview and other material has formed part of a paper that is just appearing in Social Science and Medicine called the QALY at 50. So please watch the interview and have a read of our paper and get a deeper understanding of the history of health economics.
Well, prior to that, I was an industrial engineer, worked for Procter & Gamble. And interesting you say that. One of the things that I learned there was how to assess different projects in terms of the costs of alternative projects and the benefit that you would get from alternative projects.
Right.
And this is a well-developed field in industrial engineering and called generally resource allocation. If you've got limited resources, how do you figure out where to spend them?
Yep.
And the objective there, of course, is maximizing profit. So you have an objective function, maximizing profit, and you have your costs and you have your constraints and all the rest of it. And then I did my PhD after that in operations research. So I worked on my PhD part-time. Initially, I simply wanted to take a few courses in operations research, advanced courses. I didn't really intend to finish the degree. I was just doing this in the evenings while I was working. And the next thing I knew, I'd done all the course requirements for the degree, and all I had to do was a dissertation.
Right.
So I left Procter & Gamble, took a junior appointment at McMaster University and worked on my dissertation there. So I didn't have a topic for my dissertation. And my advisor at the University of Buffalo said, there's a new young doctor at the medical school at McMaster who used to teach here at Buffalo. And you should go to talk to him. He's got some ideas. And his name is David Sackett. David Sackett actually suggested, shortly after this conversation I had with David Sackett, he said, and I came back to him with these ideas the next week, and he said, those are really good ideas. There's a workshop coming up at Johns Hopkins in about a month's time, and I think you should attend that workshop. I'll see if I can get you in. Submit these ideas as your idea for kicking around. So I went to that workshop, and Herbert Klarman was there, of course, and so he was one of the guys I interacted with and got some feedback from, and didn't do anything further other than that week, but he was encouraging, and it was inspirational for me to, you know, a senior guy in the field like that thought stuff I was doing had some merit. So, so yeah, I did. I've told this to any number of people, but back when I was developing these ideas, I would alternate day by day between just the height of euphoria, thinking, you know, this is great stuff. This is going to change the whole way that people think about decision making in the healthcare field. To the next day, I'd be thinking, you know, there's got to be some major flaw.
Right.
There's got to be a major flaw in here I'm not seeing, and this is going to get ridiculed, and I'm going to look like a real dunce. You know, it's just fortunate the way things line up. I'd had the industrial engineering experience at Procter & Gamble in how to evaluate programs and sort of a cost-benefit style of framework. And at McMaster in the business school, I was teaching a course on decision analysis, decision analytics. And the course was, a lot of the course was von Neumann-Morgenstern utility theory and setting up decision trees and measuring utilities and, you know, folding back the tree and all the rest of it and determining what's the right way to, you know, the best decision. So when David Sackett posed this problem to me and I started wondering, well, okay, I know how to do all the cost side of it, but how do I do the outcome? How do you measure the outcome? Well, how do you measure health? And it just kind of naturally occurred to me because I was teaching this every day on utility theory and how you measure outcomes and preferred outcomes and less preferred outcomes and intermediate outcomes and all the rest of it. I thought, well, you know, this seems to fit. So I had to think a little bit about how you make the standard gamble apply to health outcomes. And so that was the crux of it. And I didn't have the TTO at all in mind, at all.
Yep.
So I had this standard gamble and I started going out and trying standard gamble on people, and I would try it out on my students in class. And one time I was asking the class, and these were MBA students, evening students. So these were all working folks who were already university grads and working on their MBAs. And I was asking them, you know, suppose you have these different health outcomes, and I'll give you 2 outcomes with a gamble and 1 outcome with certainty, and which outcome would you choose? And this one bright guy thinking about it, and he says, I have a hard time figuring that out. He says, you know, would it be like staying in one of these states for half the length of time and then the other one for half the length of time versus staying in this other state for the entire time? Could I think of it that way? And I said, yeah, I guess you could. And he said, well, then I can answer the question. Right. Whether I take the 50-50 gamble, because I could, my mind, you know, I think better that way. And I said, yeah, okay. So then, you know, I got thinking about it after. I thought, well, yeah, maybe that makes it easier for people. And so I started testing the time trade-off as an alternative to the standard gamble, you know, measuring the same health states and the same people and 2 different ways and so on. And as they say, the rest is history. I mean, the time trade-off in England particularly took on a life of its own. Sure. Because when Alan Williams and Paul Kind, this is a little known fact that your audience may be interested in. A little known fact is when Alan Williams and Paul Kind were setting up their big measurement
Yes.
project.
Yep.
And they came to us and asked us for the algorithm for the standard gamble and the time trade-off, because they were doing an initial pre-study
Right.
to test the standard gamble versus the time trade-off to decide which they wanted to use. We sent them the algorithm and we made a mistake. The algorithm in the standard gamble had a typo in it that we missed and they missed, and they implemented a standard gamble algorithm that had an error in it.
Right.
And so in this pre-test, they got time trade-off results that made sense and standard gamble results that made no sense.
Right.
So they went forward with the time trade-off. I don't know if they ever publicly admitted that the standard gamble results were erroneous, but I think they felt the time trade-off. I know Alan felt the time trade-off matched the concept of QALYS and life years, which it does.
Yes.
You know, on the surface, it does match. The difference is, of course, it doesn't incorporate risk and any
Sure.
risk aversion that people may have, which the standard gamble does incorporate. I think QALYs are fit for the purpose. I don't know if people will use them. I don't know if the NHS will be faced with a program decision or resource allocation that will that would require QALYs. I think they're appropriate. Again, as an elderly person, I know the Ontario government has issued some guidelines on allocation of respirators should we run out of them.
Yep.
And they have been very careful on how they say this, but obviously older people and who have got fewer life years left and are at higher risk of not being saved by a respirator, that you're going to give the respirator to a younger patient who's got a higher probability of being saved by the respirator and has got more life years to live. So, that's the QALY concept is embedded in saying all that, and everybody would agree that that's the right thing to do. You're not being quite as open by actually measuring, giving numbers to it. But that guideline is out there, for example, in Ontario. Now, it hasn't had to be used because we haven't run out of respirators, and hopefully we're not going to now. So, I think it's appropriate.
Right.
Although as an older guy, the one good thing I keep thinking of is Alan Williams saying that, well, we've had a fair innings.
Right.
And I was always a big fan of Alan's fair innings concept. I don't know how well it's being actually used or implemented, but it always struck me that's a good way to think about